Hey guys, my name is Scoby. Today I'm going to be showing you how to blur a background of an image in Adobe Photoshop to get this effect. Without the effect, it looks like this. With the effect, it looks like this. We're going to be starting on a brand new document. This will work with any type of image you want, as long as you have a subject in mind that you want to blur. So the first thing you're going to want to do is select the quick selection tool up here, and we want to make sure that it's on A+ as standard. So what we're going to do then is duplicate our layer on the right hand side. We're going to keep one background just as a backup. So we're going to keep the background as a backup, and by clicking Control and J, we're going to make a duplicate of that layer. So once we have our duplicate layer made, what we're going to do is start selecting the part of the image that we want to keep in. So in this case, it's this beautiful girl right here. So what we're going to do is use our quick selection tool, and we're going to make a selection. So to scale up and down your quick selection tool, you can use the open and close brackets. So I'm just going to make my quick selection tool a bit bigger, not that big, and I'm going to go around and start highlighting the girl. So what you want to do is simply click around, and the girl should start being selected. So what you're going to do is just select the entire subject. Now I'm not going to be as accurate as you should be because I want to make this tutorial relatively quick, but take some time and make it as accurate as you can. And don't be worried if you select too much, it's fine, we can remove it after. I will show you how to do that. So to select the majority of what you want and keep that in. So I'm happy with this so far. So the next thing we're going to do is remove some of the selection that we don't want to keep. Now this is similar to how I used in my tutorial to remove a background. So I'm going to scale down our tool. I'm going to zoom in, and we want to remove this section. So as you can see in the middle of my tool right now, in the middle of my circle, there is a plus sign. If I hold down the Alt key or Option on a Mac, it will change to a minus, and this is how you know the selection is going to be removed. So what we're going to do is select inside our area that is selected, and we're going to highlight over it, holding the Alt key to keep the minus up to remove a selection. And you're going to go around the image and make sure you only have selected what you want to have selected. So it's best to be accurate early. You can go back and edit this later, but it's best to get it done early to get the best results and save you more effort later. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be going perfect in this image just for speed and efficiency of this video, but it's definitely worth, if you're doing this for like a professional use or even just to use on a thumbnail or anything like that, I would recommend spending some more time or anything like that. So let's say we're pretty happy. I'm happy enough with this right now. I've removed roughly everything I want to remove from this image, and you should have highlighted everything that you want to keep. So what's the next step? Our next step is to come up to the top of our quick selection tool, make sure it's selected in case you selected something else, and we're going to click Refine Edge. Now once we have Refine Edge selected, we have a couple of options in here, and we can also see where our tool is selected. We can preview this in a couple of ways to see just around the area or whatever other way you want to use alongside here. We have a couple of options to smooth out around the edge to make it a bit more smooth, and we can add a little bit of feather, and I would use these tools sparingly if possible. It's best to get the results from just pure quick selection tool rather than counting on these after to make it a bit cleaner. But these can definitely help if it's a more complex selection that you're trying to go about taking. So once you have these, I'm going to add a little bit of smooth, and once you have all these sorted out to the way that you're happy with, what we're going to do is output our selection to a new layer with layer mask, and we're going to click OK. So now our whole selection is going to be on a new layer, and we're going to rename it right now to girl, so we know that this is our layer of the girl. If we remove this, it's just her layer on this image. We can edit this later, and I'll show you that a little bit later on. Now we also have, since we output this to a new layer, we still have our background layer, and I'm going to call this our blur layer. Now this is the layer we're going to be adding our blur to. So I'm going to work on this right now, and we're going to add a blur. So how we do this is go to Filter and Blur, and you can select the type of blur you want here. Now I would recommend playing around with these blurs to see what type of effect you're going for. Gaussian blur is the blur I use most often. It's my favorite type of blur. If that's a weird thing to say, I'm sorry. But I would recommend playing around with types of blurs, seeing what works for you, and it will really depend on the image. So I'd recommend playing around with these and play around with like the variation and the settings in them. So I'm just going to play around with the intensity of this blur to see what I like, and I'm happy with something around that. It might be a bit too intense for like a natural image, but in this case I kind of like it, and I'm going to go okay with this blur. Now, as you can see, after adding the blur, we can see that there's some little nasty bits around the girl that are still being a bit annoying, that are just being a bit fidgety. So how we can change this is by selecting our girl and mask layer that we created a little bit ago. We're going to select the mask side of it. Now, as you can see, it's black and white within that layer. So what we can do is we can grab a white brush, so we can select the paint layer to white, and if we grab a brush tool, we can paint onto the image, and anything we paint onto the image in white is going to add it to the image. So as you see, as I'm rubbing on white on my layer, it's adding it to the layer and removing the blur in the background. So anything you paint on in white will add to the layer, anything you paint on in black will take away from the layer. So if we change our color by clicking this arrow, you can also click X for a shortcut, we can paint onto this layer. And if you're painting around here, I would recommend using a soft brush, soft edge brush, as it will just make it look a bit more natural, and we can paint onto the layer to remove the parts that look unnatural. And this is just going to make the blur look a little bit better, and you can come back and edit this at any time that you want. If you're doing it around anything that's not here, I would recommend going back to the hard brush, as it can just make it look a little bit better. And I would recommend you being more accurate with it when you're doing your own thing. This is, like I said, just for video purposes. So it's going to be a little bit less accurate than you would if you were doing it for something more professional, I'm going to say. And I missed a little bit up here. And I'm just going to gently brush on around her hair with a soft brush, which just helps it make it look a little bit more natural. And I missed a little bit here. This is just because her hair is kind of shallow here. So I'm just going to paint over that lightly just to give it that more natural feel. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks relatively good. Now, we can do a couple different things to add effects to this blur to make it look a bit more cleaner. So as you can tell right now, the background of the blur is pretty dull, and it could just pop a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new layer, and we're going to add like a sun style effect up here. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab my gradient tool. It should be under your paint bucket if you have it here. I'm going to select a circle gradient. I'm going to select a yellow type color. So try pick a sun type color. You can choose whatever type of yellow you want. And I'm going to select the gradient type to foreground to transparent, which is this effect right here, which will be your whatever color is on your foreground, which in this case is my yellow, to a transparent, which is the checkered box. So I'm going to select that, select the circle, the radial gradient. I'm going to select my new layer, and I'm going to draw a gradient in the corner. Now play around with the size of this gradient to get an effect that you want. I would just play around with it, and kind of a bit of trial and error here is no harm. So once you have your yellow effect on here, or whatever color you want, you're going to add a layer mask. Now what we're going to do is hold Alt and come between the two layers until you get this effect right here, and we're going to add a layer mask to our blur layer. Now what this is going to do is make sure that our yellow gradient only affects this layer. Now we're going to click on our layer 1 again, which is our gradient, and I'm going to play around with the layer options to see what kind of effect we want on here. Now if you click on it and select once, you can see there's a blue outline around the box. Once that's on, we can scroll through the layer options and see which effect we want to see what's the most desired. Now I would just recommend playing with this and playing around with the opacities just to see what you like. I'm quite a fan of that soft light. I'm going to keep that soft light. I'm going to turn down the opacity just a little bit. Actually, I like the opacity a little bit more there. There we go. And I'm pretty content with that. Now, once you have your layer here, you can move it around and change it. I'm going to just stretch it out a little bit. As it's a gradient and not an image, it should work a little bit more naturally. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that so far. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. It's just the little gradient can just add this nice little flare effect. You could also just add a lens flare by selecting the layer and going filter, render, and we could throw a lens flare on here. If you're just trying to make a nice little effect up with the light, which could also help it out. In this case, I don't like it at all, but it's just some options that you can just throw onto the image. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this, be sure to drop a like. Let me know how you got on with this down in the comments below, and if you had any troubles, let me know. I'll help out the best I can. If you want any more tutorials over here on something specific, let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to check out my other Photoshop tutorials if you want to learn something new. And I have some more other videos on the channel if you just want to learn something new. It's a fun time for everybody. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Drop a like, subscribe if you're new, and until next time, guys, as always, keep it salty. Peace.